Putin sending an ominous message to the West during their three-day summit this week. As new concerns rise, they are looking to undermine the U.S. dollar. Take a look at this. Vladimir Putin announced this week that Russia will begin using the Chinese yuan for international payments instead of the dollar. Saudi Arabia is also in talks with Beijing to do the same thing. Speaking of Saudi Arabia, meanwhile, they're in talks with Iran as well to consider an economic alliance with China and Russia. And they can even be joining the BRIC countries, which is an acronym for these countries here, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These countries all have emerging economies. So what happens if our economy and the U.S. dollar are no longer the world's dominant currency? Former Assistant Treasury Secretary and host of the Monica Crowley podcast, Monica Crowley, is here to weigh in. Monica, great to see you this morning. Let's start right there. What happens if these emerging economies move away from the U.S. dollar towards the Chinese yuan?
Well, good morning, Will. It's great to be with you. And it's really hard to overstate exactly how catastrophic the abandonment of the U.S. dollar would be as the world's global reserve currency. Look, since the end of World War II, the dollar has been the safe place to go, and it's been backed up by a couple of things. It originally was backed up by gold, but President Nixon took us off the gold standard, so there's no hard asset backing up the dollar anymore for the last 50 years. But also it's been backed up by the strength and economic power of the United States and the fact that oil has always been traded in dollars. If that were to end, that would mean the end of the U.S. dollar. Look, there is a perfect storm happening right now, Will. The world's reserve currency, being that, having that status has been a real privilege, but we've abused the privilege by wholly reckless monetary and fiscal policies over many years, certainly over the last couple of years, which has really devalued the dollar. On top of that, now you do have this perfect storm of Biden's weakness, his war on American domestic energy production, the Ukraine war, and as you point out, because of all of these things, we've got America's enemies led by China forming a new economic bloc. And all it would take at this point now, because we're at this pivotal moment, Will, is for Saudi Arabia, who has indicated that they're open to this, to say, you know what, we're going to be open to considering other currencies to trade in oil. If that were to happen, there would be a complete implosion of the global economic system, but certainly the American economic system. And if that were to happen, you'd be looking at sky-high inflation, just raging Weimar Republic kind of inflation. If you think inflation is bad now, just wait. But more importantly, we would lose our economic dominance and we would lose our superpower status.
Monica, the world's reserve currency, you said it's a privilege for the United States for the dollar to have been the world's currency. How does that relate to each individual American? How has that changed or impacted or improved our lives throughout the last several decades?
Yeah, I mean, it's given the United States incredible dominance in the world in terms of the economic system and in terms of trade. It's kept prices down. So whether it's energy prices, whether it's your food prices, the entire global economic system is reliant on the safe and secure dollar. But that is no longer true, again, because we've been printing money like crazy and devalued the power of the dollar and the value of the dollar. But on top of it now, again, oil is the critical linchpin of this. If Saudi Arabia decides to join with America's enemies here and start trading oil in different currencies, that is going to undermine the entire global economic system. And here at home, you know what it's going to mean for us? It's going to mean raging inflation, so much worse than anything we have ever experienced, Will. And I'll tell you, they're setting it up so that they can then come to the rescue by introducing central bank digital currencies. If they were to do that, and the United States already has a pilot program, that means the loss of your individual economic freedom, because the government will have total access and control of everything you buy and sell and the ability to turn it off like that.
Ominous warning. I hear you. Saudi Arabia is the tipping point. Oil trading in dollars is the tipping point, and obvious huge consequences for our economy. Monica Crowley, thank you.
Hello, citizens of the world. This is Lawrence coming at you with another end time update. And as you heard it directly from the mainstream media, right? This is directly in front of your face now, right? This is not some old Joe Schmo from the dark corners of the web telling you that everything's finna collapse and turn into nothing. And the United States is gonna lose its reserve status, and the East is going to take over. This is not that. This is now the mainstream, though those people weren't cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, because as you see right here, the news is telling you this now. The mainstream media propaganda machine is now telling you this. Why are they telling you this? Not because it's right in your face now, right? These things are imminent, which means that, and there's other reasons why they're telling you this too. So they can gauge your reaction, see how you're going to respond to it, see if you do anything at all. Because if you don't, they'll know, okay, well, they're going to accept, they'll know more or less if you're going to accept what's coming or not. Regardless if you're going to accept, if there's going to be more of a rebellion or more of a you're going to be pacified and accept the tyranny that they have planned for us all, right? Now, as you heard Miss Crowley elaborate, which, Crowley, I don't know if you heard of Aleister Crowley. She may be a descendant of his. Wouldn't surprise me one bit, because all of these guys you see on your TVs and, celebrities and et cetera like that are just basically all a part of the machine, the beast system, right? But as she went on to elaborate, she's saying that we're going to lose our reserve status. The dollar, the BRICS nations are ditching the dollar because they're tired of the United States weaponizing the dollar to basically get other countries to do their bidding, essentially. Excuse me. So, yes, and all of this that's happening is by design. This has been a long plan since they formed the Federal Reserve back on Jekyll Island in 1914. And just think about that name, Jekyll Island. That sounds ominous, right? But all the Eastern countries which were our allies, which gave us this privilege, like Saudi Arabia being the main one, they're now siding with China, right? Iran is siding with China and Russia and in India and all the rest of the Eastern nations, because they're tired of the United States. They're tired of the West bullying them, okay? And this, again, is all a plan to allow China to be the world superpower now, the dragon, right? Because that's what China represents, the red dragon, which is now creating peace between long-time rival Saudi Arabia and Iran. They were, going at each other's throats for the longest time, and now, China's bringing them together, right? So it's China out here that's acting as the peacemaker, not the United States. That's something to keep in mind. Now, I want to go over a couple of articles with you all to sort of illustrate what I'm trying to explain to you right here, right? Now, as you see right here, China and Brazil strike a deal to ditch the United States dollar. In a time when de-dollarization news are dropping fast and furious, because every single day we're getting something new about, the East further decoupling and getting away from the West, and more specifically the United States dollar. This news is coming in every day. Even Elon Musk is now jumping on the bandwagon. Someone who has nothing to do with economics, right, is now sharing his 2 cents, right? Saying, serious issue. U.S. policy has been too heavy-handed, making countries want to ditch the dollar, right? We're bullying all these other countries that you better do this or else, you're not going to use the dollar, right? Combined with excess government spending, which forces other countries to absorb a significant part of our inflation, right, which we first defined a decade ago. Not a day goes by without some modest or not so modest shift towards a world in which the U.S. currency fully weaponized after February of 2022, and what they're referring to right there is when we threatened to take Russia and Iran off the SWIFT system, which is an international payment system for everybody to be able to transact in dollars. You can't. That's why we're the world reserve currency today, because all these other countries have to sell their currencies and exchange them for dollars in order to buy oil and conduct international trade. This is why we're the global reserve currency. And all this really reared its ugly head when the war broke out between Ukraine and Russia, right? So fully weaponized after February 2022 for the entire world to see and fear is no longer the world reserve, and today was no exception, right? According to the Brazilian government, China and Brazil have reached a deal to trade in their own currencies, ditching the United States dollar as an intermediary entirely. The deal, Beijing's latest salvo against the almighty greenback, will enable China, the top rival to U.S. economic hegemony, and Brazil, the biggest economy in Latin America, to conduct their massive trade, which amounts to $150 billion per year in financial transactions, directly exchanging yuan for reais and vice versa, instead of going through the dollar. In doing so, China extends its bilateral USD exempting currency arrangements beyond countries such as Russia, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia to now include Latin America exporting powerhouse. And, they have a lot of, raw foods and grains and veggies and fruits over there, right? So Latin America is a big player. We get a lot of our, oranges and pineapples and stuff like that from Brazil. So the fact that they're siding with, another deal, because they're a part of the BRICS nations, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China, and now South Africa, right? So they've been coming up with deals, left and right for the last year and a half, just about. And they're set to have this big announcement in August, which lets me know that, there's a big event in the United States is set to come before then. So let's keep going. Saudi Arabia joins China-led economic and security bloc. Russia also a member, right? So in the latest evidence of major shifts in global power dynamics, the Saudi government has approved the kingdom's partial membership in a Chinese-led economic, political, and security bloc, right? And right here it says Saudi Arabia will join the Shanghai Cooperation Organization with the initial status of a dialogue partner. Formed in 2001, the SCO full members are China, Russia, India, Pakistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. Iran is expected to become a full member later this year, while other dialogue partners include two more countries that have traditionally been in the United States sphere of influence, Qatar and Egypt. They're joining the East now, right? Underscoring the group's security component, SCO members will conduct a joint counterterrorism exercise in Russia's Chelyabinsk region, north of Kazakhstan, in August. And again, they're coming out with this major announcement, which I think they're going to officially announce that Saudi Arabia will be accepting other currencies other than the United States dollar. And I think that announcement will come as a result of the planned collapse of our markets. And with our markets in turmoil, that could be the perfect excuse for Saudi Arabia to come out and say, hey, we're going to allow other countries to trade in our oil other than the United States dollar. And that's when you're going to see all of these other dollars in all of these other countries that were forced to use the dollar for international trade and the trade in oil. They don't need those dollars anymore. They're going to use their own currencies. So what's going to happen? Well, those dollars are going to be imported back to us, right? Or exported back to us, rather. And all those trillions upon trillions upon trillions of dollars are going to come home to roost, right? To bid up prices here in the country, which means that inflation is going to rage out of control. Now, Ms. Crowley mentioned the Weimar Republic type of inflation, and we're going to go over that particular hyperinflation because it's more of the one of the most famous hyperinflations. You know, you had ones that were more severe than that one, but that one was just the most famous, well-known one. You had, you know, hyperinflation in Greece, hyperinflation in Hungary, which was actually worse than Weimar republics. You had the inflation of Zimbabwe, hyperinflation in Zimbabwe, and a couple others, right? So this is nothing new. So we're going to go over the historical records of how these things happen because there's similarities between all of them and the underlying reasons why a currency loses rapid value, such as that, right? But back to this. So Saudi Arabia and all of these other Eastern countries are joining the BRICS nations, which is very ominous sign for the United States in our global hegemony as the world's reserve currency, right? As you see, all these members right here, of these other nations, the BRICS nations, China, Russia, India, that's not Iran right there. I don't know who these other guys are, but they're right here and they're not playing any games anymore, right? The Republic of Tajikistan, you have, I don't see the flags of these other guys right here, right? But they're tired. We are tired of you Americans. We are sick and tired of you Americans screwing with us. We're tired of you Americans. Now we come for you. We come for you dirty Americans. A die, a guy, a gua. Oh my goodness. We are so screwed. Okay, but yes, and it says right here, by engaging with these U.S. rivals, it really does seem like this multipolarity is in full effect right here, right now, right? And it, down here it says that the Saudi petrochemical giant will build a $10 billion oil refinery in China and acquire a 10% stake in a leading Chinese oil refinery. So Saudi Arabia is building a oil refinery in China, right? I don't know when the last time the United States built an oil refinery, and Saudi Arabia is building a brand new one in China. So what does that tell you? The writing is on the wall. They're done with America. They're done with the West. I don't know what more you need to see for you to understand this, right? For you to understand that it's over. It's over for America. It's over. It's all the way over right here, right? Speaking of regional cooperation, Saudi Arabia is also close to restoring diplomacy with Syrian governments, right? And these developments all point to the waning influence of the United States, okay? Because, again, they're tired of us Americans right here, right? Pozar's warning of dollar waning sway comes true. And, again, I shared this with you all a couple months ago when he first came out and said this, right? Because he said right here after, you know, all the developments, which I just went over, Saudi Arabia joining the BRICS and building oil refineries and all these other countries, Brazil and Russia and all these other guys signing new deals every single day, seems like, right? These developments follow an earlier warning by Pozar, a former Fed and U.S. Treasury Department official, that we could be witnessing the dusk for the petrodollar and the dawn for the petro yuan, right? Meaning that the sun is setting on the U.S. dollar, right? And the sun is rising for the new petro yuan, right? Which is going to be the new king currency, right? Now, I don't think that China, because they already told you the plan, right? That China is not going to become the world's reserve currency, right? It's going to be a basket of new world reserve currency. So we're still going to be in this basket, but China is going to be one of the world reserve currencies. As you know, the Russian ruble may be one of the world's reserve currencies because their currencies are going to be backed by gold right here, right? And basically it's going to be the digital currency, as she mentioned. That it's going to be they're going to have these digital currencies. And when the Fed introduces these currencies as a result of the pandemonium that will be taking place when the markets collapse. Most likely by the summertime. I don't know when that could be. My guess is sometime in June or July, because this big announcement is coming in August. So I can see this announcement and complete implosion of our economy taking place by sometime between there, right? So Zoltan also told you again about that, how the Fed will start QE officially by the summer of 2023 of this year. So get ready for that. And as you see right here, the Fed is going to come out with the new instant payment system in July. Okay, so they've already told you that, okay, well, this is they're gonna roll this out as a result of the pandemonium that's going to be taking place in the markets. You know, the Pozar already told you that the Treasury market, this QE that's coming up, is going to be a direct result of Treasury market dysfunction. Okay, which means, you know, when something's dysfunction, it's broken, it's not working properly. Okay, so our markets are going to be completely broken, completely imploding. Okay, and this is going to be the solution to these problems, which is the Federal Reserve central bank digital currency. Central bank slave currency is what I like to call it, right? Because your freedom is going to be gone. And again, this is not, I've been warning about this for about 6 years now. So this is nothing new to the people who have been listening to me, because I've been telling you every step of the way that this is coming. Most people think that this digital currency thing is just something new that they can't know. They've been announcing and telling you what they're going to do to you for a while now, right? It's early, way back in the 80s, they told you this, right? So I'll share that as well. Maybe I'll go over that in another video. But they've essentially told you this already, right? That this is coming. So this is no surprise. Okay, now again, Miss Crowley mentioned the Weimar Republic and type of inflation. And I don't know if you guys remember during the Weimar Republic, you had people with wheelbarrows full of cash, wheelbarrowing their money to the store to buy a loaf of bread. Right? This is how bad the inflation was in Weimar Republic. Excuse me. Now, it's good to know your history, because you can know just about how these things are going to transpire, take place, and what you can do to prepare for it, right? Because this is nothing new. This has happened many a times before, right? And back in Weimar Republic, I want to highlight on this one because, again, not only is the most famous one, but she brought it up. Now, this is what we're going to be experiencing here in America, right? And see, this is going to be way worse than Weimar Republic. You want to know why it's going to be way worse than Weimar Republic? Let me tell you why. Because Germany did not have the world reserve currency, okay? We had the world reserve currency, not Germany, okay? So this type of inflation that happened in Germany was pretty bad. But what's coming for us is going to be way, way worse, okay? Because we have the global currency, meaning that there's dollars all over the world, right here, right? And those dollars are going to come home to roost in the United States. That means massive, 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 massive inflation. That's what this means, okay? Now, before the war, right, which was World War One, that's when they formed, the Federal Reserve and all these other things like that. The diseases broke out, similar to what's happening today with COVID and, all this other stuff, right? But before the war, okay, the German mark, because that's the name of their currency, it was stable. It had stability in it because Germany at that time had a good economy, though, excuse me. After the war, the pressure of the war started weighing down on their currency because debt started to accumulate because of the war. And it lost about half of its value between the start of the war in 1914 and 1918, right? So by 1918, the German mark lost about half of its value, right, when the war broke out, okay? That's when the German government took the mark off the gold standard so they can print more funny money to fund the war efforts, okay? They couldn't raise the taxes because everyone was already broke because the war crippled their economy, right? So they tried, to come out with war bonds, which was basically an attempt to raise capital. A war bond was basically people loaning their money to the government to be able to fund the war, but people were broke. So, the war bonds just basically fell through the floor, and that didn't work. So what did they do? Well, they printed more money, of course. What else were they going to do, right? They literally printed money out of thin air that people were stupid enough to accept, right? Why? Because it's all confidence. It's confidence. If people believe in their minds, right, that Germany is a country that has good enough standing, or is perceived to be a strong and solvent nation, right, people will accept that promissory note, which is a piece of paper backed by nothing at all, right? It is literally literal paper, right, that says, hey, this is Germany's currency. We're good for all of our debts. We could pay our debts. Of course, I could pay all my debts if I can print a whole bunch of funny money and say, hey, this is the currency. This is worth something, right? I can print. I'll never go broke, right? I just print all the currency you need, right? So, funny enough, in 1918, Germany had printed 5 times the amount of currency it had in circulation prior to the war, right? I bring that up because if you remember, I shared an article with you all which showed that we printed 50% of all of our currency ever created when COVID hit. When COVID hit, the Federal Reserve printed like $3-4 trillion, which amounted to or equaled out to about 50% of all the currency of the United States dollars ever created was printed in that one moment right there, right? So we're already on that path to the shadow realm, okay? We're already on our path to the shadow realm. But anyway, so the mark went into free fall in 1918, right? But so in 1913, to put everything in perspective, before the war, 1913, 20 marks were worth £1 sterling, okay, which is the British unit of currency, right? In 1918, it was 43 to 1. So 43 marks for every pound sterling. So in 5 years, it took more than double the amount for 1 sterling. And by the end of 1919, it was 185 to 1, right? So this is how fast the currency loses its value, its purchasing power, right? And that, my friend, is the entrance to the abyss. Okay. Living expenses increased 8 times, 8-fold in that 6-year period from 1913 to 1919. And in 1921, it was 265 marks to £1 sterling. Okay. So with their currency essentially in free fall and rising deficits mounting up because of the war and everything else they had going on, they had no choice ultimately but to print more money or default. Okay. The same situation that we're in today. So what did they choose to do? Germany. Well, they chose to print more money. This is why it's important to go over the historical records, because we're in the same exact situation today. It's either we can print more money or we can default on our debt. We're not going to default. I'm going to tell you that right now. We're going to default. We're just a different type of default, which is basically to pay out worthless paper, right? So we're screwed right here, okay? So what do you think that we're going to choose to do? Well, print more money, okay? And they're showing you that right now because we just printed $400 billion to paper over the banking crisis that took place, to bail out these smaller banks. So they're basically already showing you what they're going to do when it hits the fan, when it comes to letting everything crash and burn to the ground, or printing funny money, monopoly dollars, to keep it afloat. What they're going to do? They're going to print more money and devalue the currency. That's what they're going to do. They're going to devalue the currency, because that's the same thing as when you hear them say they're printing more money, they're basically telling you we're devaluing the currency. That's what they're doing. They're creating inflation. Okay. So back to Germany. Before they ultimately decided to cut the printing presses back on, they decided to attempt to raise taxes to try and come up with the money, but that wasn't enough in the end. So they ultimately had to cut the presses on full throttle right here, right? So inflation, which is, again, the expansion of the money supply, i.e. printing money, picked up into warp speed. The taxation, because they raised the taxes, plus the sky-high inflation did not go well with the people. You can imagine, right? So basically, people's wages went up more and more to adjust for the inflation that was taking place, because the wages, the money was losing value on a daily basis. So you had the worker and the owner, or the business owner, negotiating their salaries on the daily at this time, to adjust for the inflation. So their wages went up more and more to adjust for inflation, meaning that they had to pay more income taxes as they moved into a higher tax bracket right here, right? So the more money that they made, the more taxes they had to pay. But they had to pay more in taxes, even though the money that they earned had less and less purchasing power. So they were losing. They had to pay more in taxes for money that had virtually little to no purchasing power right here, right? So they were getting squeezed everywhere around. The devil was hitting them upside their head in every direction. Okay, you see how the devil do you? So people started quitting their jobs. Okay, unemployment rose. Factories failed, and Germany was on the hook for about 200 billion marks to its debtors, and they were only pulling in about 90 billion because the tax revenues went down due to the rising unemployment right here. Okay, so let's just take a wild guess. What did Germany do to come up with the money to pay for its debts? Right, they couldn't tax, they couldn't borrow the money from the people through war bonds. So what do you think they did? Because there's not too many other things they could do, right? So what do you think they did? They went back down into the cellar and cranked up the printing presses. That's exactly what they did. And now they are in what is known as a death spiral, because they have no other options to combat inflation anymore. They can't raise the interest rates because the people are tapped out. They couldn't handle higher taxes and higher interest rates, okay, right here, to stop inflation. So they print, which means the prices go up, which means they have to print more money to offset the increase in prices, right? Because the prices went up, they have to print more money because of that, which means prices went up, which means they had to print even more money. So essentially, it's an Ouroboros, the snake eating its tail, a death spiral, okay? And in 1923, a loaf of bread went from 70 marks in 1921 to 200 billion marks by 1923. And again, this is how fast the currency will lose its value. Okay, people think they can just sit on their hands and just wait all day and they can just go to the last minute to prepare. No, because everyone's gonna have that same idea, and you'll be lucky to get anything by that point. This is why I've been telling you way in advance to prepare. So you don't have to be one of those people out there, like the end of the world movies where people are at the store fighting for a can of beans, right? You don't have to be that person because you've already prepared, right? So a loaf of bread went from 70 marks in 1921 to 200 billion marks by 1923, which means that they have officially arrived to the abyss. Okay, they are now in the shadow realm. Okay, now I don't know if you've seen those pictures of the guy with the wheelbarrow full of paper, going to buy himself a loaf of bread, because that's how much it took to buy one loaf of bread. That whole wheelbarrow full of cash. And I should have it up on the screen right here. Right? They were getting paid twice a day. So they'll have a chance to buy things before the prices went up. So they'll have their family waiting there when they first got paid the first time, and they'll rush to the store to buy, goods before they went up by the time he got off of work. Okay. Which increased the velocity of currency, the rate in which currency is exchanged for real goods. The paper is exchanging hands for goods, which means the goods are getting sold faster and faster. Real goods are coming off the market, but the paper is staying in the market, okay? Which means that increases inflation, right? Because it creates a shortage on the real goods being bought with paper printed out of thin air, okay? You can't print stuff, though now I guess they got those 3D printers, which prints, these low-quality imitation products right here, right? So that's what you want, right? So real-world goods that took real energy, real resources to generate. Those products we enjoy went into short supply because everyone had paper, but few had real goods, okay? And a lot of the companies ultimately stopped accepting cash because of this. And what they did? They reverted back to a barter system, okay? Which is why I tell you all again why it's so important to be prepared, okay? Because you can forget about trying to barter with that paper. Because if I wanted funny money, I'll go buy a Monopoly board. No one wants these dollars that can just be printed out of thin air. I want real value for the value that I'm providing you. I want something in exchange that I can actually use. I don't need to start a fire. Okay, I have plenty. There's plenty of sticks in my backyard right here. Right, I don't need paper. Right, I can start a fire perfectly fine. I want real goods. I want energy. I want food. I want anything other than that paper. Okay, so basically, prices in the mark were doubling every 4 days. Okay, people had to negotiate the prices of the food they went out to eat at a restaurant before they ordered it, because by the time they would finish their meal, the prices would have went up by the time they finished eating, right? And that's the same thing that's happening in Venezuela right now. I was gonna show you a news clip, but it's kind of long. I guess I found a shorter one. I'll link another news clip about Venezuela in the comment section below. But check this out.
Take a closer look now at the situation in Venezuela. That's with our Focus report. Venezuela, of course, a country where prices double every few weeks and a monthly salary isn't enough to buy meat for one family meal. That's why the government has knocked those 5 zeros off the refurbished bolivar in a desperate attempt to control hyperinflation. When the president, Nicolas Maduro, was reelected earlier this year, he promised to focus on boosting the economy. But Venezuelans have yet to see their lives improve. France 24's Claire Pacalam reports from Caracas.
Mira, de aquí hasta esa curva en el Paraguas, hasta ahí se paraban los carros.
Renny is a taxi driver in Caracas. He used to get good business at the university campus.
Hoy en día, como lo ves, parece un desierto, como todo en Venezuela. Todo en Venezuela está vuelto un desierto.
Taxi drivers can't find spare parts to fix their cars. And even if they could, they cost a fortune in Venezuela.
Este es el repuesto. Este es el repuesto que se me echó a perder y bueno. Buen día.
Rennie's car has broken down, so he's lost his income.
Bombín del croche. No es el mismo. Es parecido, mas no es el mismo.
The shopkeeper can't get the part Rennie needs from his suppliers.
They don't want to import merchandise because the people right now in Venezuela, they don't have money to spend to fix their car.
Muchas gracias, pues. Hasta luego.
Rennie tries another shop.
¿Cuánto sale?
500.
Nada menos.
Esto todos los días lo suben. Todos los días. Tú pides 20, te mandan 2. No te estoy mintiendo, 2. ¿Cómo puede trabajar usted así?
No lo puedo comprar porque está muy caro.
The alternative is to fix the broken part. Rennie goes to yet another shop to buy a small piece of rubber. He tells us this neighborhood is dangerous, so we film with a smaller, more discreet camera. A mechanic inserts the piece of rubber inside the broken part.
Ahí está todo el efectivo.
Rennie heads back home. The car park below his apartment is a graveyard of broken down vehicles.
Un problema tener el carro así, no en óptimas condiciones, pues, porque de esto dependo. De esto dependo y me está presentando esta falla. Entonces, esta parece que no es la goma. No es la goma que
He spent the equivalent of 2 days' work buying the wrong piece of rubber. He heads back to the mechanics.
Voy a ponerlo, si no te traigo el carro.
Round 2.
Esto solamente ocurre aquí en Venezuela. No funcionó. No, nada.
He's going to have to buy a brand new part after all, and he's wasted time and money trying to fix it himself.
No seguir en esto, de verdad, ya me cansé. Me cansé y me decepcioné. Hola, ¿cómo estás?
That evening, Rennie breaks the news to his wife.
Bueno, yo salí a reparar el carro, pero fue algo cuesta arriba porque no pude hacer nada, pues.
Without Rennie's income, it's up to Beatrice to pay for their grandchildren's school fees.
Sí, porque uno trata de estar más unido en los problemas. No tratamos de estar en pelea porque eso es muy feo también. Pero bueno, solucionar.
When he looks out of his window, Rennie is reminded how easy it is to lose everything when you live in Venezuela.
Eso es deprimente, de verdad que es muy deprimente ver tantas personas jóvenes comiendo de la basura, porque esos son desechos.
Every morning, Beatrice walks to her shop in downtown Caracas. She can't keep up with inflation.
Si tú vendes una pintura hoy en 500 y mañana la vas a comprar en 500, estás perdiendo. Por eso es que cada día los negocios van más feitos.
Por eso es que también la gente casi no viene. Casi todo está cerrado por eso. She imports in dollars but sells in the Venezuelan currency, which is worth less every day. So Beatrice has to put her prices up.
A la orden. Esa sale en 1,400. Ya yo no tengo.
But that means her customers can't afford anything.
A la orden.
Sometimes Beatrice doesn't sell anything all day.
Ahí estoy, como dice, luchando ahí hasta que aguante o me vaya o me quede, no sé. O me quede en la casa, esperando que René me mantenga. O se vaya él, no sé.
Hola. Amigo fiel.
Rennie borrowed the money from a friend and bought a brand new part. A month later, though, his car broke down again. He's trying to find the spare part he needs and the money to pay for it.
Now, as you saw in that clip right there, that news clip of how hyperinflation can completely annihilate a country's economy, cripple it and bring it to its knees. And there was far worse news clips right here, right? This is just a shorter one I could just show you guys real quick, a 5-6 minute clip. But they had other clips where they show, people eating, consuming cow blood soup, just to survive, and exchanging gold flakes, for haircuts and food. There was this one family who had a food truck, and hamburger and fries, right? They had the menu: hot dogs, hamburgers, fries, stuff like that, right? Finger foods. And you can basically get a hamburger and fries for a silver quarter, okay, or a 1/10 ounce of silver. And for that same hamburger and fries, I mean, I don't know how many millions of bolivars you will have to provide to buy the same hamburger and fries that will only cost you a 1/10 ounce of silver right here, okay? So this is why I stress having some precious metals, okay? We're going to go over some charts of metals in a second. But what you're looking at right here is an excerpt out of a study of how inflation affects an economy, okay, during hyperinflation, essentially. More specifically, again, Weimar Republic's hyperinflation right here, right? And basically, right here at the bottom, you see the percentage of what people's monthly income, what they spent it on, right? So we zoom in right here. You see that rent was actually not even 0.5% of someone's monthly income. Well, there's multiple reasons for that. Number one, you had because the inflation ate up the value of the money. So, $600 a month now, or 600 marks then versus 600 marks after it takes 200 billion marks for a loaf of bread, right? It's vastly, different. So, and another reason for that, why rent is not even 0.5%, is because the government passed regulations and laws to prevent landlords from going up on people's rent, similar to what they did back during COVID, when the landlords didn't have to pay, people didn't have to pay their landlords to pay rent at all for a period of time. And something similar is going to happen again. So again, I've been telling people that real estate is not a good investment. It's not something good to go into. But people have, everybody has their own goofy ass ideas about what could be good and what could be bad, what they think could be a good investment, what they think could be a bad investment. So those people basically who just built all those homes for the wise people to come and take them off their hands for pennies on the dollar. That's essentially what's going to happen to all these people building homes and stuff, thinking that they're smart and thinking that they're gonna come out this thing a winner. Okay. Now, what you see at the bottom right here is below rent is 64.7% of someone's monthly income went towards what? Food. What does Lawrence tell you to buy all the time? Food. I tell you this. I've been telling you this for years. Food. Okay. Now, if you have food, then 64% of your expenditure will be wiped out. Right? You wouldn't. All that stress to be off your shoulders because you are wise enough to prepare ahead of time. Right. So below that, you had light and heating, energy, which is a 15.7%. So food and utilities basically make up about 80.4. What's that? About 80.4%. 80% of your monthly expenditures went towards food and utilities. Right. And below that, sundry expenses, which is basically miscellaneous things, soap, clothes, parts for your car, as you just saw, just miscellaneous things that you have to spend. But the primarily you'll be spending money on food and energy. Now, if you had gold and silver, energy wouldn't be a problem, right? You already got food, right? So your precious metals could be used to just save, pay your energy, and you have all that other extra income. All the pressure will be off your shoulders. You could be living as a winner during this period of time. But why I think, this is what happened during the Weimar inflation. Again, I tell you that this inflation is going to be way worse because we're heading into a famine, a global famine, right? It won't be much food or enough food to go around, which means the prices will be sky high on what little remains. Which is why they got insect powder and alternatives prepared for you, right? Eat the bugs, right? Eat the maggots, eat the mealworm, right? Eat the grubs, right? That's for all you people who refuse to prepare, right? And see, I've been telling you for a long time, right, to be prepared for what's coming. So there really ain't gonna be no excuse, right? You're gonna be out here eating maggots and mealworms by the time they get through with you, right? If you ain't prepared, okay? So again, China has half the world's rice, like almost, I think like a third of the corn, a third of the half the more, like 66% of the soybeans. I went over all this information with you in my 7th report, where I went over all this information with you, or on my YouTube. It's the very first video I uploaded. Okay, I went over all that information in that report, so check that out. It's very important for you to have this understanding. But China has most of the food already, so China's gonna be the new global superpower right here, not the United States of America. Okay, so it's important for you to have it's important for you to have or to be prepared, right? Now, this right here is a gold chart, right, that shows the price of gold from in Weimar marks, right? Okay, before the war, 1914, all the way up to its crescendo in 1923, when hyperinflation basically just obliterated the country. And as you see right here, when the war started, and it was going on, gold went up a little bit, but it wasn't. But see, again, once this thing starts, the acceleration phase was from 1917 to about 1919, as you see. You see gold then went up right here, then it corrected in 1920, then it went right back up, another slope to 1922, had a small little dip, then it went straight up from there. Okay, so you see what gold does in that 10-year period right here, right? You want to have gold, precious metals, okay? Now, to show you something more recently, we could go to our back in 2008, when the financial crisis first happened, right? And you see right here, right during the financial crisis, you had gold from 2007 go from a little over 600 an ounce to about right under 1,000 an ounce. Then it corrected and went back down to a higher high, about 600 and change, right below $700, maybe like 670 something, right? And then it basically went all the way up to about 2,000, little under $2,000, which was the all-time high until maybe I think a year and a half ago, where gold broke a little bit above that. I think $2,077 is the new all-time high. Don't quote me on that, but it's somewhere around there. Okay, so when disaster strikes, which is happening right now, you need to have your gold and silver, right? You need to have gold and silver. Now, I want to show you guys a chart, right, of what happened in in the 1970s, because we had an inflation problem here in America in the 1970s, right? That's when Paul Volcker raised the rates to 20%, because inflation was around 13%, okay? And that was enough to bring our inflation back down. Well, we can't do that today, because back then we didn't have as much debt as we have today. They came 20% of $32 trillion equals default, equals bankruptcy. That's what that equals. So that's impossible to do today, right? We can't even manage 5%, let alone 20%, okay? But I want to go back and show you guys what silver did in the 1970s, and show you some charts of some restaurants to see what they so you can kind of gauge and see what Lawrence is kind of talking about right here, right? Now, as you see right here, this is from SD Bullion's website, right? And it says, in the 1970s, silver rose from under $1.50 in 1970 to nearly $50 an ounce in 1980. So basically, in 1970, you could have bought 500 ounces of silver for about 500 ounces of silver would have ran you about $750 right here, right? 500, which means 1,000 ounces of silver would have ran you about $1,500, okay, for 1,000 ounces of silver. So by 1980, that $1,500 investment would have been worth about $50,000, okay. So again, silver rose by more than 25 times, or by more than 2,400%. Okay. And gold went from about $35 an ounce to $850 an ounce. So gold made a similar move right here. Okay. Now again, let's go look at another chart right here. Right. Now you see 1970 cost of living context, and then U.S. dollar terms, and back then. So an ounce of silver was $1.50. Okay, minimum wage was $2.10. A new house cost $23,450. Okay, the average income was about $9,400 a year. So a new car was $3,400. So instead of buying a new car, you could have spent about 40% of that on 1,000 ounces of silver. Okay. You know, you had sugar, 39 cents for a 5-pound bag. This is how much purchasing power the United States has, the dollar has lost between 53 years. It has, because what is a bag of sugar now? A 5-pound bag of sugar now is like what, $5-6? All right. So it's more than 10-15 times. You know, milk is about $8 a gallon. So about 15 times. Right? Because again, I'm not talking about the milk that's been milked from cows that have been injected with growth hormones and all other hormone genetically modified diet. Right? I'm talking about organic milk right here, right? And you can taste the difference. So I don't drink growth hormone milk. I drink organic milk. Okay. I don't. So that milk is about $8 to $9 a gallon right here, right? So silver again, $1,500. Okay, or the average yearly income was $9,400 a year. So that would be, let's see, 3,000. So that was about 15%. 15% of your yearly income would be on silver, right? And about 10 years later, so let's go look at some more charts. This is the 1980s cost of living right here, right? And a new house went from $23,000 in the 70s to about triple as much, $76,000 in the 80s. The median income went from $9,400 to $16,000. A new car went from $3,400 to about double, more than double, right? Minimum wage only went up $1. Ain't that so? That's gonna go up the least amount is how much you get paid, which is why you had to start a business, you know, because that's the difference between business owners and workers, right? You know, workers get paid wages, and business owners, excuse me, business owners get paid fees. Okay. Business owners decide what they want to charge for their product, but workers don't get to make that choice, right? So, again, in the 80s, so you spent $1,500. Remember that gold chart I showed you from 1914 to 1923, and you saw gold go all the way up, right? Now, this is the same 10-year inflation cycle right here, right? So, 1970, you bought the silver, 1,000 ounces of silver for about $1,500, okay? And in 1980, that silver will be worth $50,000, which means that you could buy a brand new car for about, what's that? About, 100 ounces is 5,000. So about 140 ounces, 135, 140 ounces of silver of that 1,000 ounces of silver could have bought you a brand new car, right? You could buy a lot of sugar. That silver basically kept up and exceeded even the rate of inflation Okay, that's basically why I said all that to say that. That silver, if you're wise and you have some silver put up, you could be way ahead of the game. Right? You have food put up. You don't have to worry about food. You already got food, right? You got silver. So you'll be doing extremely well if you put some silver away for yourself. Okay. Let's go look at some menus right here. You got KFC. This is the menu from the 80s. Right? KFC menu from the 80s. 1980 menu right here, right? Now you could buy 2-piece chicken, potatoes with gravy and a roll for 85 cents. Now I think it's like $3 for a 2-piece or something like that. Right? So again, you got silver. Right? You could buy this 1 ounce of silver for $50. Let's the bumper box at the very bottom, which is 21 pieces of chicken. So I could buy me about 8-9 bumper boxes for 1 ounce of silver. That's 160, 180 pieces of chicken right here, right? For 1 ounce of silver. That's a lot of food right here. Okay. Let's go look at this steakhouse menu. Now you got this Ponderosa Steakhouse. This is a menu from the 80s right here again. Now, the most expensive thing on this menu is the T-bone steak dinner right here at the top. And you get a T-bone steak, Idaho baked potato, tossed green salad, a salad in a roll for $2.49. Now, I could eat a whole lot of T-bone steaks, about 20 of them to be exact, for 1 ounce of silver. Okay, and if we go up to the bottom, Ponderosa chopped sirloin sandwich. So I could get a 1/4 pound, a 1/4 pounder, chopped sirloin on a bun with some French fries for 69 cents. That's about almost 2.5 months worth of 1/4 pound sirloin sandwiches and French fries for 1 ounce of silver. Okay. So that's the purchasing power of silver if you're wise enough to put some silver up for yourself. Right? I said all that to say, buy silver now. Because again, this time is going to be completely different. Because we're heading into a famine, a global famine, which is why countries are stockpiling food and resources right now. Because those who have the resources, those who have the gold make the rules. Okay. In China and Russia, they have all the gold. Okay. So that's going to be it for today, guys. I'm going to be coming out with another scriptural reading, about, well, you'll see. But it's going to be very good. I'm also going to come out with a scriptural reading about, is the law done away with? Because many people believe that the law is done away with and we're not under the law anymore, which is falsehood. I'm gonna prove that in my next report. So until then, guys, I love you all. I hope you guys heed the wisdom and take the warning and prepare for yourself and your family. And I'll see you on the next report. Shalom. Bye.